The soft hum of fluorescent lights was the only sound accompanying Venom Smith as he stood frozen in the polished hallway of Mercy General Hospital. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm linen, but his senses barely registered any of it. His gaze, steady, sharp, always decisive in boardrooms, was now clouded, fixed through the glass partition of the maternity ward. 5 bassinets stood in neat formation, like tiny ships in a quiet sea. Each cradled a newborn wrapped in pastel blue and mint green. Nurses passed by with practiced grace, their whispers fading like waves. But Venom's world had stilled, collapsing into a single, jarring realization. They had his eyes, all 5 of them. Not just the ice blue hue that had often drawn the attention of cameras and magazine covers, but the exact tilt, the defined fold, the piercing intensity. That familiar glint stared back at him every morning in the mirror. He knew those eyes, like he knew his heartbeat. And now, they were multiplied by 5, blinking up at the sterile ceiling, unaware they had just shattered a man's entire sense of self. For 15 years, Venom Smith, tech mogul, media-dubbed prodigy, and one of America's youngest billionaires, had carried a private truth no one dared question: that he was sterile. The diagnosis had come quietly, almost too soon, when he was just 19. A rare genetic quirk, the doctors had said. Cold, scientific, definitive, final. He had mourned silently then. No tears, no outward grief. Just a decision to pour everything into legacy, not through blood, but through code and capital. Caldwell Dynamics, now the empire he built from nothing, was supposed to be his only heir. But 5 children, with his eyes, with her eyes. His throat tightened. Luna Perry. The name echoed in his chest like a chord struck too hard. 2 years. 2 whole years since she left. Since that morning, he found the apartment half empty, and a note resting gently on the kitchen counter, inked in her looping handwriting. I can't breathe in your shadow anymore. And now, this? He had come here on a whisper, a half-muttered comment at a gala from someone's wife who had heard something about Luna, babies, and a hospital. He had laughed it off at first. Luna? Babies? She had always said she wasn't ready. But the whisper had clung to him like static. By midnight, he was pacing his penthouse, unable to sleep. By dawn, he was in his car, following instinct instead of logic, something Venom Smith never did. Yet here he was. His tailored trench coat hung awkwardly from his stiff shoulders, the wool too heavy, too formal in this fragile space. The man the world revered for his calm under pressure, who negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without blinking, was now unraveling in front of 5 tiny strangers. Or not strangers. His children? His mind reeled. How could this be possible? Was the diagnosis wrong? Did she know? Why hadn't she told him? Had Luna carried this truth alone, believing he wouldn't care, that he wouldn't come? A nurse approached gently, her eyes scanning him with practiced caution. Sir, are you all right? He opened his mouth to answer, but only air came out. Her tone softened. Are you here for someone? He managed a single name. Luna Perry. She paused, eyes flicking to the chart in her hand, then nodded. She's in room 814. Visiting hours end in 30 minutes. Venom nodded slowly. His legs, numb from standing, finally began to move. But as he took a step toward the door, he paused. The glass window remained behind him, glowing with soft light. Inside, one of the infants stirred, a curl of dark hair peeking beneath the cap. The baby opened their eyes, and there it was again, the unmistakable, undeniable truth. This wasn't the start of a reunion. It was the start of a reckoning. The life he'd accepted, structured, powerful, built on the idea that he would never be anyone's father, was now crumbling, piece by piece, under the weight of a single look. His world had changed the moment he saw those eyes, and yours might too. Sometimes, the truths we believe about ourselves are simply the ones we've been told. But life has a way of rewriting the script. And if this moment moved you even slightly, if you felt the ache of what was lost, or the shock of what might be found, I invite you to join the journey ahead. Like this video, leave a comment below, or follow the channel to see where fate takes Venom and Luna next. Their story is only just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what comes after this door opens. The walk down the corridor felt longer than any red carpet, more daunting than any boardroom floor Venom Smith had ever crossed. Room 814. The number pulsed like a drumbeat in his chest. Each step drew him closer to answers he wasn't sure he was ready to receive. But his feet moved as if drawn forward by something more primal than logic, by hope, guilt, and something he had long buried beneath ambition and control. When he finally reached the door, he hesitated. Through the frosted glass, he could see the blurred outline of a woman. Her back was to him, but he knew even through distortion, even after all this time. Luna Perry. Her silhouette was leaner, shoulders narrower than he remembered, but there was no mistaking her. Her dark curls were pulled into a messy bun, a few tendrils escaping to graze her neck. She stood with a stillness that masked exhaustion, yet radiated strength. In her arms, she cradled one of the infants, humming softly. The lullaby was unfamiliar, but her tone, low and tender, was exactly as he remembered. The kind that once lulled him to sleep after sleepless coding nights. The kind that made stormy nights feel warm. He knocked gently. She didn't turn. The second knock was louder. This time she shifted, her body stiffening. Slowly, she pivoted, her gaze sweeping toward the door with casual curiosity, and then freezing as recognition struck. Their eyes met. 2 years collapsed into the silence between them. Venom had imagined this reunion in 100 ways, some angry, some tearful, others ending in apologies, confessions, even a kiss. But nothing had prepared him for the sheer weight of this silence. Once soft and quick to laugh, her dark eyes were now guarded. Still beautiful, but different. Sharper, like someone who had learned to protect herself, because she had to. He opened the door slowly, his breath shallow. "Luna," he said. Her name came out more as a breath than a word. She didn't answer. The baby in her arms stirred, letting out a soft sound that anchored them both in reality. Her arms shifted, instinctively soothing the child. 1,000 unspoken thoughts passed in her eyes, but her lips remained sealed. I saw them, and Venom finally managed the babies. Luna nodded once, barely perceptible. His eyes fell to the child she held. The infant's small face was tucked into her collarbone, but a wisp of dark brown curls poked out from beneath the blanket. Her hand, impossibly tiny, rested against Luna's chest, fingers curling like she was holding on to a dream. "They have my eyes," he whispered. At that, Luna's gaze faltered, just for a moment. "Yes," she said, her voice quiet but unshaken. "They do." He swallowed hard. Are they mine?" A pause, then a breath, and finally, a nod. "Yes." Venom stumbled back a step, the simple affirmation landing like a hammer to the chest. He looked at her again. Looked. The fatigue on her face, the tightness in her posture, the flicker of something unreadable in her expression. 5. he murmured, his voice cracking. There are 5. Quintuplets, Luna confirmed. 3 girls, 2 boys. He ran a hand over his mouth, trying to steady the chaos in his mind. How? I mean, I was told that you were infertile? She finished for him, her tone not unkind, but far from gentle. He nodded, ashamed. I thought so too, she said. Until I found out I was pregnant. I had tests done. It turns out your diagnosis wasn't conclusive. Something about early detection, missing viable counts. Rare, they said. Did you know before you left? He asked, voice low. No. Her answer was immediate. I found out weeks after. I tried to call you. Venom's heart stuttered. I changed my number after you left. I know, Luna replied. I emailed and messaged through your assistant. Nothing. He closed his eyes. The truth, sharp and ugly, took form inside him. He had shut the door too quickly, too completely. He had assumed she walked out because she no longer loved him, when in reality, he had made himself unreachable. I thought you moved on. He said you didn't want me. I didn't want to be forgotten, she said quietly. Or worse, resented. The baby stirred again. Luna looked down and adjusted the blanket, rocking gently. I wanted to tell you, she continued, but I didn't want you to come back out of guilt. I needed to know you'd like us, not just feel responsible for us. Venom took a slow breath, the weight of her words anchoring deeply. The man he had been 2 years ago, the one obsessed with control, who measured love by availability and success by valuation, would have seen her silence as betrayal. But now, standing here, seeing her with their child, and knowing she had carried 5 lives through fear and judgment, he saw it for what it was: strength, sacrifice, a quiet, unyielding kind of love. And maybe still, a flicker of love for him too, buried beneath scars and silence. I want to know them, he said suddenly. The children. I want to know you again, if you'll let me. Luna met his eyes. For the first time since he entered the room, her expression shifted. Not softened, but cracked. Just slightly. You can start, she said, holding out a bottle toward him. This one's hungry. Venom stepped forward slowly, unsure. The baby peeked up at him with heavy-lidded curiosity. He took the bottle. His hand trembled. And just like that, a billionaire who had conquered industries was handed the most fragile challenge. His daughter. His legacy. Not written in lines of code, but in the rise and fall of tiny breaths. This was only the beginning. The bottle was warmer than he expected, its shape unfamiliar, its weight delicate. Venom Smith, whose hands had once moved with lethal precision over million-dollar contracts, found himself fumbling as he cradled the infant. His arms stiffened at first, terrified of holding her wrong, but Luna stepped in without a word, her fingers gently adjusting his grip. Support her head, she murmured, guiding him with the quiet authority of someone who had done this 5 times a day, every day, alone. He nodded, grateful and a little ashamed. His heart drummed like a foreign rhythm in his chest. As he brought the bottle to the baby's lips, she latched on instinctually, her tiny mouth working in soft, rhythmic pulls. Her eyes fluttered shut again, lashes barely brushing her cheeks. Venom stared. He was feeding his daughter. His daughter. The words felt foreign in his mind, almost laughably surreal, like stepping into a life that had gone on without him, a movie he'd forgotten he was once cast in. Her name, he realized suddenly. What's her name? Leora, Luna said softly, folding a blanket at the edge of the crib. It means light in Hebrew. Venom glanced down at the baby in his arms. Lyora, he repeated under his breath. The name suited her, fragile and luminous. And the others? He asked, voice hushed, as if any louder would disturb the spell this moment had cast around them. Luna straightened. Noel, Sienna, Micah, and Gabriel. 5 names. 5 lives. Each one a world he had missed. They all have your eyes, she added quietly. But Micah, he has your scowl. Venom looked up in surprise. There was a flicker, just the ghost of a smile, on Luna's lips. It vanished just as quickly. But it was enough to ignite a memory. He remembered her smile clearly. It once bloomed when she solved a piece of code before him. The way it turned shy after he kissed her forehead. The way it faltered when she realized he was slipping further into the orbit of his ambitions, farther away from her. He hadn't seen it in years. And now, it was like sunlight breaking through clouded glass. Can I meet them? He asked. She didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be measuring not the sincerity of his question, but the depth of her reserves of trust, of safety. I'm not asking to step into their lives unthinkingly, he added, or to undo what you've done. I want to begin. Luna sighed. You're already in their lives, Venom. You don't know what that means yet. She motioned for him to follow. They moved down the narrow corridor of the maternity suite, past a few sleeping infants and an exhausted nurse flipping through paperwork. The final room was quieter, darker, curtains drawn, lights dim. 5 bassinets lined up like tiny moons in orbit. Venom stood in the doorway, breath catching in his throat. It wasn't the scale that overwhelmed him. It was the detail. A frayed stuffed giraffe rested in Noel's crib. A soft gray elephant was beside Gabriel. Each blanket was folded with care. A small notebook perched on a nearby shelf, tracking feedings, naps, and medications. Each item whispered Luna's quiet labor, her invisible scaffolding of love that had held this constellation of children together for 9 months inside her and now 9 days outside, all without him. He took a step forward. Gabriel let out a whimper, and Luna moved swiftly, her fingers knowing exactly where to press on his chest to calm him. Venom's chest ached. You did this alone, he said, not as a question, but a realization. Luna's gaze didn't waver. Yes, I should have been here. You weren't. There was no blame in her tone, but its simplicity cut deeper than any accusation. He had chosen his absence, even if he hadn't known what he was missing. He had sealed the door after she left and locked himself behind it with pride. I thought about you, she said suddenly, surprising him, more than I wanted to. He turned to her, eyes sharp with longing. When I was in labor, she continued, 36 hours, Venom. It was brutal, and somewhere between the contractions, you would have had a plan for this. You would have made a checklist, scheduled everything, and probably tried to bribe the pain away with tech. A chuckle escaped him. She didn't laugh. I hated that I still thought of you, she said, this time softer. But I also hated that I couldn't hate you completely. Because part of me knew you weren't malicious. You were just unreachable. Venom inhaled sharply. I didn't know how to stay. I thought building something bigger would mean I mattered more. But you already mattered, Luna whispered. And I think that terrified you. The room fell into silence again, but not the same silence as before. This one was full of possibility. Venom looked down at the children sleeping before him. His legacy, not as headlines or revenue charts, but in tiny fingers, sleepy breaths, and a woman who once loved him so fiercely She chose to walk away when he couldn't meet her halfway. He said, "I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'll show up anyway." Luna didn't reply, but she didn't stop him when she handed him a fresh diaper and pointed toward Micah's bassinet. And in her silence, Venom found his first step toward redemption. Venom Smith had never been afraid of failure. He had failed at 22, launching a doomed payment platform that tanked in beta. At 24, he failed again, losing a 7-figure investment on a startup that flamed out in 6 weeks. But each loss taught him something, making him sharper, deliberate, and invincible. That invincibility evaporated the moment he opened Micah's diaper. "What the hell is—" "Don't," Luna warned from across the room, her voice dry. He froze, one hand holding a fresh diaper, the other hovering like a surgeon unsure of where to cut. Micah looked up at him with wide, suspicious eyes, his lower lip trembling in warning. "I think he's judging me," Venom whispered. Luna didn't answer. He glanced over. She was holding Leora, rocking her with one arm, bottle in the other, gaze impassive but mouth twitching ever so slightly. "You're enjoying this," he muttered. "I earned the right to," she said, 5 times over. He exhaled, adjusted the tabs, and fumbled through what could only be described as a patchy but mostly successful attempt. There was no applause, but Micah didn't cry, which was enough of a victory. Venom stood back and looked around the room. The 5 bassinets, the smell of powder and warm milk, the low hum of a white noise machine, Luna's slow breathing as she fed Leora. It was a world entirely apart from the one he had built for himself. No assistants, no schedules, no control, just the quiet chaos of life. "How do you do this?" he asked, more to himself than to her. "All of it. On your own." Luna's eyes flicked up. "You stop thinking about the how. You do it." Venom sat down heavily on the cushioned bench near the window. Outside, the sky was lightening, a soft wash of gray giving way to lavender and blush. Boston stirred beyond the glass, traffic whispering awake, delivery trucks trundling by, city lights dimming in surrender to dawn. He hadn't pulled an all-nighter like this since college. But back then, it was code and caffeine and competition. Now, it was diapers, heartbeats, and a woman who had once looked at him like he was the only horizon worth chasing, until he stopped looking back. "You named them all without me," he said, not accusingly, just softly. Luna's shoulders shifted. "I had to." He nodded. "They're beautiful names." Her expression changed, almost imperceptibly. "I chose them with meaning." He waited. She didn't elaborate. But in her silence, he imagined the nights she spent researching, whispering names in the dark to 5 growing heartbeats, choosing words that felt like hope, like home, like safety. None of those names included his. "They deserve to know me," he said after a pause. "They deserve consistency," she replied, not unkind. Not appearances, not guilt, not just intentions. Venom didn't argue, because she was right. He had appeared and disappeared in her life before. He had let silence fester, let pride close doors that should have remained cracked open. He had loved her, yes, but on his terms. On a clock that worked for him, in a world shaped by his pace. And now, Luna lived in a different rhythm. This wasn't a reunion, it was an audition. "I want to be better," he said. Luna looked at him, then be. Her simplicity leveled him. She wasn't asking for gestures. She wasn't interested in apologies wrapped in diamonds or words wrapped in promises. She wanted presence. She wanted proof. and Venom didn't want to offer anything less for the first time in years. He rose, walked toward the counter, and sterilized the next bottle. Luna watched him quietly, unsure. "I can figure it out," he said, sensing her gaze. "I'm not stopping you," she replied. He measured the formula, boiled water, and poured it carefully. His movements were stiff, inelegant, but determined. Behind him, Sienna stirred, her small cries beginning like the murmur of a storm. "Bottle's almost ready," he said, adjusting the angle slightly to cool it faster. Luna said nothing, but when he turned, she was handing him Sienna. Her eyes met his, and something shifted. Not forgiveness, but something close to permission. He took his daughter, cradled her with the caution of someone afraid to break something sacred, and fed her in silence. Outside, the city woke. Inside, a man began to remember how to stay. By the time the hospital cafeteria opened, the sky outside had bloomed into gold. Venom Smith stood by the window of room 814, coffee untouched in one hand, eyes locked on the city below. The sunrise bathed the skyline in soft hues, far gentler than the sterile white light that filled his offices 30 stories higher. Down there, the world he'd built was stirring. Board meetings being scheduled, stock prices adjusting with every whisper of his absence. The engine he had spent over a decade fine-tuning was moving without him. For once, he didn't care. Behind him, Luna moved with quiet efficiency. She was changing Noel, murmuring words only a mother would understand, pausing to brush a wisp of hair from the baby's face. Her body looked tired but grounded, and her voice, low, steady, felt like an anchor in a storm he never saw coming. "How long have you been here?" he asked, finally turning from the window. She didn't glance up since the 29th. "That's... what? 9 days? 10, today." He ran a hand through his hair. "They keep you here that long?" Luna shrugged. "Preemies. 5 of them. High risk. The doctors want to monitor feeding, development, and weight gain. Make sure their lungs are strong." Venom nodded slowly. "And you haven't left once?" Her eyes flicked up, gaze unreadable. "There's no one to leave them with." The words landed like a weight in his chest. "I could have been here," he said softly. "But you weren't," she replied, not cruelly, but with the simple authority of someone who had lived the truth. He didn't respond. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse, and Luna didn't strike him as someone who had space for those anymore. She returned her focus to Noel, zipping up the onesie and tucking her back into the bassinet. Then, without a word, she sat down and leaned against the wall, head tipping back, eyes closing for a moment. "You should sleep," Venom said, voice low. She exhaled a laugh without humor. "I don't remember what that feels like. I can stay. Just a few hours. You could nap. Don't offer things you can't commit to." Her eyes opened slowly, fixing on him with quiet defiance. But beneath it, he could see the rawness, the weariness etched not just into her face, but into her soul. He walked over and crouched beside her chair. "Luna, I'm not offering to fix everything. I can't erase the past or pretend I deserve your trust. But I want to earn a place here, with them, with you." A silence hung between them, thick with memory. She turned her head and studied him. "This isn't a rescue mission, Venom. I know. This isn't about being a good guy for a week. I know. And I'm not the woman you left 2 years ago. I don't need a savior. I don't need a man to validate what I survived. I know," he repeated, softer now. "But I still want to be here. Not because I pity you. Not because I'm trying to make up for a headline. Because when I look at them, I feel something I didn't think I could ever feel." Luna watched him for a long time. Then, Finally, she said, "You don't know their cries yet." He blinked. "What? You don't know the difference between Micah's fuss when he's gassy and Gabriel's when he's hungry. You haven't learned that Sienna calms faster with pressure on her feet or that Noelle hates the overhead lights. You don't know that Leora hums in her sleep. She hums." Venom felt the heat rise in his chest. "No," he said quietly. "I don't know those things, but I want to." Luna's face didn't soften, but her shoulders did. She looked down at her hands and rubbed her thumb over her palm. A habit, he realized, from the days she used to code for 12 hours straight, soothing tension in her joints without even thinking. She hadn't changed as much as she claimed, but she had hardened, and he was part of the reason why. "I used to imagine this moment," she whispered, "that you'd show up one day, that you'd look at them and see yourself, that you'd stay. But then I'd picture the other version, you showing up, getting overwhelmed, walking out again, and that terrified me more than being alone." Venom's heart cracked. "I'm here," he said, "even if I fumble, even if you're still angry, even if it takes months for you to believe it, I'm not going anywhere." Luna's throat bobbed as she swallowed. "You said that once before," she murmured. He nodded. "And I failed you." Her eyes met his. This time, they didn't hold fire, just exhaustion, and a sliver of something else, something fragile. Hope. A knock at the door interrupted the stillness. A nurse peeked in, clipboard in hand. "Sorry to bother. We need to run some scans on the twins." Luna nodded, rising slowly, body heavy from days without sleep. "Micah and Gabriel?" she asked. The nurse confirmed, wheeling in a small transport bassinet. Venom stepped aside, watching Luna gather the boys with the tenderness of muscle memory. No hesitation, no fear. Just love is shaped by repetition. He wanted to be that steady. He wanted to be worthy of that rhythm. As she disappeared down the hallway, Venom looked around the quiet room. 5 bassinets. 4 are still here, 1 empty chair, its cushions still warm. He sat in it, and for the first time, he didn't feel like a visitor. He felt like someone beginning again. The hospital room felt different without Luna in it. Venom sat with his elbows on his knees, watching over the remaining bassinets, their contents swaddled in soft pastels. Leora stirred now and then, her hand twitching with the sleepy reflex of a dream. Sienna let out a minor hiccup that made her whole body jolt, then settled again. He leaned back in the chair Luna had just vacated, the scent of her still clinging faintly to the fabric, lavender and milk, and something unmistakably her. Something that stirred muscle memory in him, a longing that hadn't dulled with time. The first time they'd met, it wasn't dramatic. It was a coding seminar at MIT. He was already a golden boy, top of the class, the youngest in the room, confident in the way only someone who had never truly failed could be. And then Luna had walked in. She didn't try to compete with his ego. She didn't roll her eyes or flirt or flash credentials. She opened her laptop, joined the back row, and wrote code that made his look like a clumsy translation. It had taken him a full hour to speak to her, 2 to challenge her logic. 3 fell into a debate until the janitor flicked the lights off and told them to leave. They'd walked out into the cold, neither saying goodbye, both too charged by the night to pretend it was anything casual. She wore a dark denim jacket. Her curls were loose, her hands in her pockets, and she smelled like clove tea. She had smiled at him, not flirtatious or coy, just a curve of lips that made him feel simultaneously seen and undone. He'd never fallen in love in a day before, but Luna had always been exceptional at breaking his rules. A soft cry pulled him from the memory. He moved without hesitation now, stepping to Noelle's bassinet. Her lips puckered, eyes still closed, and he reached for the pacifier Luna had left nearby. He held it gently against her mouth, and she accepted it, sighing through her nose as she settled again. It was a small victory, but it felt like a mountain moved. The door clicked open. Venom turned. Luna entered, cradling Gabriel against her chest, Micah following in the nurse's arms. "They did well?" he asked, voice low. Luna nodded, brushing a kiss to Gabriel's temple. "Better than expected, gaining weight." The nurse gave him a brief nod, wheeled Micah's crib back into place, and left them alone again. Luna settled into the armchair slowly and carefully, unready to trust comfort. Her body was aching, but she wore the discomfort like armor, refusing to let it distract her from what mattered. Venom sat opposite her, the silence folding between them again. "I remembered the first time we met," he said quietly. She glanced at him, curious. "MIT? Yeah, you were wearing that denim jacket with the torn sleeve." Luna blinked. "You remember that?" He nodded. "I also remember you corrected my syntax on a whiteboard before the class." She let out a soft exhale. Not quite a laugh, but not silence either. "You didn't talk to me for 3 days after that," she said, eyes distant. "I thought I'd crossed a line." "You had," he replied. "But it was the exact one I needed to be pushed over." She looked down at Gabriel, who was falling asleep again, his face turned into the crook of her neck. "I hated that I loved you so fast," she murmured. "You were dangerous in a way I didn't know how to prepare for." Venom swallowed. "And I didn't know how to make space for you. Not the right way." Luna didn't answer. Her eyes were far away again. He watched her study her child, as if trying to find herself in him. Her fingers grazed Gabriel's curls in slow, circular motions. "I used to think love was about orbiting," she said after a long pause. "You're the sun, and I was supposed to circle you. Keep warm in your light. Stay close enough not to burn." Venom flinched. "Luna." "But then I got tired," she said. "I needed my sun. I needed to stop spinning." He nodded. "And I didn't even notice." "No," she said. "You didn't." He reached for a bottle that had been cooling on the counter, tested it, then offered it without a word. She hesitated, then took it. Sienna had begun to stir. Luna passed Gabriel into Venom's arms, slowly, testing the weight of her trust again. He held his son more steadily this time. As she fed Sienna, the room filled with the soft sound of her suckling. Venom looked down at Gabriel, now curled in his arms, slight mouth slack, eyes fluttering beneath closed lids. He didn't feel like a billionaire here. He didn't feel like a CEO or a man trying to undo 2 years of absence. He just felt like a father. And that, somehow, was everything. "I never stopped loving you," he said. Luna didn't look up, but she didn't tell him to stop either. And that, for now, was enough. The hospital room had grown dim by late afternoon. Outside, the sun cast slanted shadows against the window blinds, striping the walls in soft gold and gray. The rhythmic sounds of beeping monitors and hushed footsteps in the corridor remained constant, like the quiet pulse of a second world that had nothing to do with theirs. Inside room 814, Venom sat cross-legged on the floor beside the bassinets, carefully folding a burp cloth with the kind of focus he usually reserved for drafting acquisition contracts. Across from him, Luna was reclining in the chair, her eyes half-lidded in exhaustion, though her arms instinctively cradled Sienna with unwavering care. They hadn't spoken in almost 20 minutes, but it wasn't the silence of avoidance. It was a silence complete of breath and weight, a space stretched between two people trying to figure out who they were now, apart, together, and in the presence of 5 small souls. Venom broke the quiet first. "Do you remember the hotel in Montreal?" he asked, folding the cloth again to keep his hands moving. Luna opened her eyes fully, startled by the memory. "The one with the skylight over the bed?" He nodded. "You said the stars looked like code. You said I looked better than the stars." He smiled softly. Still true. Her face didn't change, but her fingers paused slightly where they stroked Sienna's back. She added, "You brought me that terrible red wine from a vending machine." He chuckled, the sound faint, surprised by its warmth. "I was trying to be spontaneous. You were trying to impress me." "I still am." Her eyes flicked toward him, guarded, questioning. "He said I don't want to rewrite history." His voice quiet. "But I miss the pieces of us that weren't broken." Luna shifted, adjusting Sienna's position without responding immediately. Then she said, "We weren't just broken, Venom. We were unfinished." He absorbed that. He admitted, "I was scared to let you see me small. Frightened you'd walk away if I weren't winning." "You were never small to me," she replied. "You were enormous, consuming. I lost my edges." He looked up at her sharply. "I wasn't trying to consume you," he said. "I know," she murmured, "but you didn't try not to." That landed somewhere deep. He wanted to argue, to say he'd loved her in every way he knew how. But maybe that was the problem. He'd only loved her in the ways he was taught: provision, success, structure. He never learned to love someone through their silence, vulnerability, and independence. Especially not someone like Luna, who had come into the world and had already been taught that she had to fight harder, speak louder, and stand firmer just to be seen. Venom stood and crossed the room slowly. The room was too narrow to pretend distance, too intimate to hide. He knelt beside her. "You didn't lose your edges," he said, his voice low but sure. "I just never looked closely enough to see where they began." Luna looked at him, her eyes tired but clear. "And now?" He reached out and gently touched Sienna's blanket, a protective gesture more than a caress. "Now I see them everywhere," he said. "In how you name your children. How do you hold them when no one's watching? You still won't flinch when I speak like I have all the answers." She didn't speak for a long time. Sienna finished her bottle and dozed, her small mouth opening slightly with sleep. Luna exhaled slowly, like something had been unknotted. Then, quietly, she said, "I was going to tell you." He looked up. She said, "When I found out I was pregnant." Her gaze dropped to her lap. I was shocked. I didn't even think it was possible. I kept rereading the test, thinking there was a glitch. I mean, you were the one thing I was sure of, that you couldn't be a father. Venom's chest ached. I went to the doctor. I asked for full panels, everything. And they said, you were misdiagnosed as having low fertility, not non-existent, and that they'd gotten it wrong all those years ago. I had no idea, he whispered. I know. And when I tried to reach you, her voice wavered. Your assistant shut me out. The number I had didn't work. And I thought, maybe that was the answer I needed. He closed his eyes. I thought about driving to your office, she admitted. I went once, sat in the parking garage for an hour, watching your window from my car. You were pacing on a call. And I realized, whatever this new life was, it didn't include me anymore. I couldn't force myself into it. His eyes opened, slow and pained. I would have come down, he said. You didn't see me. I wish I had. She nodded. Silence again. Then Luna passed Sienna to him. The movement was slow, full of trust earned by hours instead of words. He took the baby gently, her head resting against his chest. When they're old enough to ask, she asks what we tell them. Venom looked down at the infant girl in his arms, her breath soft against his skin, her fingers curling and uncurling like waves. We tell them, he said, that they were born from something real. Complicated, yes. Messy, but real. And that their mother is the strongest person I've ever known. Luna looked away, but not before he caught the flicker in her eyes. She didn't thank him. She didn't need to. The third night was quieter than the first. The babies were beginning to fall into a rhythm, if such a thing could exist with 5 infants. Feedings staggered, sleep cycles imperfect but manageable. Luna, used to sleeping in fractured hours, now moved like a whisper between bassinets, her instincts sharp, her body still running on survival mode. But she no longer moved alone. Venom had not left the hospital since the day he arrived. He stayed on a small fold-out cot they wheeled into the room, a poor substitute for the penthouse bed he was used to, but he never mentioned the discomfort. He woke when Luna woke, fed when she fed, and changed when she was too tired to move. His movements were clumsy, but sincere. And Luna, though careful not to encourage what she couldn't promise, had stopped correcting him every 5 minutes. In that narrow hospital room, time folded in strange ways. Venom learned that Sienna hated it when her socks were too tight. Noelle often cried in her sleep, but settled with a hand on her chest. That Gabriel would not burp unless rocked with a particular sway, almost like a slow dance. He learned Luna's silences weren't empty. They held layers, fatigue, calculation, emotion she didn't yet want to name. And Luna, despite herself, learned that Venom didn't disappear at the first sign of inconvenience. She watched him through the lens of memory, holding 2 bottles simultaneously, humming a tune off-key while rocking Leora and Micah in tandem. He wasn't polished. He wasn't perfect. But he was still here. And that, against all her instincts, was starting to matter. One night, after the last round of feeding, Luna stood by the window, arms crossed over her chest. Outside, the city was blurred in fog, the lamplight halos soft and uncertain. Behind her, Venom sat on the cot, his elbows resting on his knees, head down. The air between them held a fragile peace. "I dreamed of them once," she said quietly, surprising herself. Venom looked up. "The babies?" She nodded, eyes still trained on the misty skyline. "Before I knew, there were 5. Before I even knew I was pregnant. I dreamed of a girl. Just one. She had your eyes. Mine too, but yours were the ones I noticed. Sharp. Unmistakable." He stood, walked to stand beside her, careful not to come too close. "I used to think about that," he said. "What our child would look like." She glanced at him. "Even after your diagnosis?" "Especially after," he admitted. "It felt safe to imagine it when I believed it could never happen. I didn't have to make room for the grief if it was already carved into me." Luna didn't respond right away. Her eyes stayed on the city, but her voice was low and raw when she spoke again. "I didn't grieve you right away. I was angry first, then numb. Then I hated how much I still hoped." Venom turned to her fully now. "You had every right," he said. Luna exhaled, a long breath from somewhere deep. "I still don't know what this is," she admitted. "You being here. I'm letting you. It doesn't have to be anything yet," he said gently. "We don't have to name it." She turned toward him, finally. "But the babies, our children, they need something. They need stability. They need us, he finished in whatever form that looks like. She studied him. Not the man in the headlines. Not the strategist. Not the perfect suit. Just Venom. Barefoot, hair a mess, wearing a wrinkled white t-shirt Luna hadn't seen in years. You never liked not knowing, she murmured. No, he admitted. But I like this kind of not knowing. Her brow rose slightly. The kind where I'm learning with you, he added. Not ahead of you, not above you. She said nothing for a moment. Then slowly, she nodded toward the bassinets. Gabriel's going to wake in 10 minutes. He always does. Venom smiled. Then I'll be ready. She stepped back toward her chair and sat down, curling her legs under her. He moved to the table where they kept the warmers and formula, checking measurements like she'd taught him. They didn't speak again for the next hour, but when Gabriel's cries came, soft at first, then louder, Venom was already there. And Luna, though she would never say it aloud, didn't feel alone for the first time in 10 nights. Not entirely. Not anymore. Chats. Morning arrived quietly, casting long streaks of light across the tile floor of room 814. The hospital had its rhythm at sunrise. A muted shuffle of nurses' shoes, the metallic clink of breakfast trays, the low hum of morning rounds. But inside the room, time still felt suspended. Venom stood near the bassinets, gently rocking Micah, who had taken longer than usual to settle. Across the room, Luna sat on the small couch, her legs pulled up, a warm compress balanced against her lower back. She looked half awake, her face soft from sleep, but her eyes alert, watching Venom without speaking. She had grown used to seeing him now, his tall frame hunched slightly, his voice hushed when soothing the babies. There was a strange comfort in how he blended into their routine, like he had always belonged there, even if he hadn't earned it yet. But there were moments, like now, when she caught herself staring too long and remembering things she didn't want to remember. He looked up and met her gaze. She suddenly said, "You used to hum when you cooked," surprising herself more than him. Venom blinked, caught off guard. "Did I?" She nodded. "Badly. Off-key. Like, painfully off-key. But you always looked so focused, like chopping carrots was the same as solving a puzzle." He smiled sheepishly. "I was trying not to burn anything." Luna leaned back, her head tipping against the wall. "I used to pretend I didn't like it. But I did." A quiet settled between them. Not awkward, just full. "I think I stopped humming when you left," Venom said after a while. Luna turned her head toward him. "Why?" "Because silence felt more appropriate. Like, I didn't deserve to make noise anymore." His words fell gently, but they lingered in the air like smoke. She looked at him closely now, not the way she had in the beginning, with awe and wonder, but the way someone studies an old photograph, trying to remember what had been missed the first time. Venom had changed, not just in how he moved, but in how he listened, in the pause before he spoke, in the way his hands now cradled life instead of control. "I used to think love was supposed to fix things," Luna said softly. He lowered Micah into his crib and turned toward her, fully present. "But it didn't," she continued. "It just exposed where we were already cracked." Venom didn't argue. "I kept waiting for you to see me," she said. "Not the version of me that fits your world, but the one who cried when I was tired, didn't always have the answer, and sometimes just needed you to pause for me." He sat down, folding his hands together, elbows on his knees. "I didn't know how to pause," he said. "I only knew how to build, how to fix. How do I keep moving so I don't have to sit with the parts of myself that feel inadequate?" Luna's gaze dropped to the floor. I thought if I just stayed silent, she said, you'd notice what I wasn't saying. But silence doesn't echo in rooms already full of noise. A long breath passed between them. Micah stirred, but didn't cry. Venom leaned forward slightly. If I could go back. You can't, Luna interrupted gently, and I wouldn't ask you to. He looked at her, uncertain. She continued, I don't want the version of you that's trying to undo the past. I want the version that's willing to sit in it with me, to feel it. Do not fix it. Venom nodded slowly. That version is here, he said, voice low. She studied him again. The room felt warmer suddenly, not in temperature, but in something quieter, like breath settling, like walls creaking open an inch at a time. Do you remember the first time you said you loved me? She asked. He smiled faintly. Chicago. Your dorm. You were wearing that massive hoodie that belonged to your brother. It swallowed me whole. You were perfect in it. Luna looked down at her hands. You blurted it like it caught you by surprise. It did, he admitted. I didn't know I would say it until I saw you dancing in the kitchen. You were holding a ladle and pretending it was a microphone. I was off key, painfully. She smiled. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. I've never stopped loving you, Luna, he said. Her smile faded, but her eyes didn't leave him. I know, she replied quietly. But love isn't what broke us. The silence after that wasn't empty. It was reverent, like both of them were finally standing at the edge of something that had gone unnamed for too long. I don't need us to go back, she said, but maybe we can start learning how to go forward. Venom felt something shift in his chest. Not relief, not a celebration, just the slow, sacred ache of beginning again. I'd like that, he said. Luna nodded, and for the first time since his return, she didn't look away when he said it. The discharge papers came faster than Luna expected. It felt surreal. After nearly 2 weeks of feeding schedules, oxygen monitors, sterile lights, and hushed lullabies, suddenly being told she could take her babies home. Home. A word that meant something entirely different now. Luna sat on the edge of the hospital bed, reading over the instructions for preemie care, her fingers tight on the edge of the folder. Next to her, the nurse clipped monitor leads from Leora's chest and cooed softly at Noelle. The babies were bundled in matching cream blankets, their names stitched in delicate cursive near the seams. Gifts from the nurses, who had grown too fond to remain professional. Venom stood nearby, quiet. He had been more subdued since the news. She could feel his energy shift. Less anxious, more restrained, like he knew the hospital had given him proximity. But the real test would begin once they stepped into her world. Outside of this room, there was no reason to let him stay. But as Luna stared at the pile of carefully labeled formula packets, the car seat manuals, the overstuffed diaper bags she'd packed alone at 7 months pregnant, something twisted in her chest. This wasn't pride anymore. This was survival. And she was tired. She glanced at him. The car's still yours. Venom blinked. The Tesla? Yeah. Good, she said. We'll need every inch of space. He exhaled softly, like the smallest tether had just been tied. They moved together without needing to speak. Luna dressed the babies while Venom loaded the gear, returning with 5 perfectly installed car seats and a quiet look of awe. It was the first time he'd seen them all in one place, strapped in, bundled like tiny passengers heading toward an uncertain future. Luna, he said gently, lifting the last carrier. Where's home? She hesitated, hand on the handle of Leora's seat. Cambridge, she replied. Just across the river. It's a 2-bedroom. Walk up. 3rd floor. Venom tried not to react, but something in his jaw clenched. Stairs? 27 of them. He swallowed a response. Luna smirked faintly. You can carry the diaper bags. He grinned despite himself. Gladly. The drive was quiet. 5 soft coos filled the cabin, broken by sleepy sighs. Luna sat in the back beside the babies, her eyes flicking from carrier to carrier, counting without realizing she was doing it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again. Venom didn't speak. He just drove, knuckles pale against the wheel, like he was holding the weight of something more than just a steering column. When they arrived, Luna stepped out first, stretching her back as she glanced at the familiar brick building. It was modest, old, and held more stories than insulation. But it was hers. She looked at him as he reached for the car seats. You don't have to come in, she said. Venom paused. I'd like to, he said. Luna hesitated, then nodded. The stairs were narrow, and the babies were heavier than they looked. Venom made 2 trips, carrying them with careful hands, sweat forming at his temples. Luna unlocked the door between trips, revealing a small but warmly lit space. Soft throw blankets, worn hardwood floors, a plant by the window that looked like it had survived on resilience alone. There was a crib pushed against the wall. Only one. Foldable bassinets were lined neatly in the living room. Every corner of the apartment had been organized with military precision. Efficient, intentional, stretched beyond capacity. Venom stood in the center of the room and took it all in. This is yours, he said quietly. It had to be, she replied. She didn't apologize for the size, the squeaky door, or the heater that clicked twice before starting. She had built this space out of necessity, not approval, and she watched to see if he would flinch. He didn't. He knelt beside the crib, brushing his fingers along its edge. You picked this out yourself? I assembled it myself, she corrected. Venom laughed softly. I can see that. You missed a bolt. Her brow arched. Don't worry, he added quickly. It's charming. She smirked, despite herself. It felt strange, this domestic dance. He helped set the bassinets in place, unpacked formula without being asked, and organized diapers into labeled bins. Luna moved beside him, efficient and wary. They didn't touch, but their movements aligned, and somehow, that felt intimate enough. Hours passed, feedings, burping, and lullabies from her old Bluetooth speaker. The sky darkened, and still, he stayed. When all 5 babies were finally asleep, Luna sank onto the couch, pressing her palm to her lower back with a tired sigh. Venom brought her tea without asking. She accepted it, cautiously. They sat silently, the kind you only share with someone who knows your ghosts. And then, softly, she said, This place wasn't meant for 6 people. He looked around. No, but somehow, it feels full without being crowded. She met his eyes. A long pause. You can stay tonight, she said. Venom blinked. Not in my bed, she added quickly. The floor's yours. Or the chair. Or both. But I can't do this alone tomorrow. He nodded slowly. I'll sleep anywhere, he said, as long as it's near them. Luna didn't respond, but she didn't take it back either. And that night, as the city hummed outside their window, Venom Smith lay his head on a worn sofa cushion in a small apartment that smelled like formula and jasmine, and he fell asleep to the sound of 5 steady heartbeats and the breath of the woman who had once been his whole world. Maybe, he thought, she still was. Luna hadn't realized how small her apartment was until he filled it. Venom didn't speak loudly, didn't move with exaggerated weight. He didn't impose, but his presence shifted the energy in the space, the shift that made the air feel heavier, quieter, fuller. He woke before she did. Just past 5, Luna stirred, her neck stiff from sleeping upright in the nursery chair. A soft rustle from the living room caught her attention. When she peeked around the corner, Venom was already pacing softly between bassinets, bottle in one hand, whispering something she couldn't quite hear. Gabriel was cradled against his chest. Tiny fingers curled around the collar of Venom's t-shirt. She didn't interrupt, just watched. Seeing him like this was jarring and beautiful, unguarded, half awake, wearing the same wrinkled shirt from yesterday, and no trace of his usual polish. His eyes were puffy. His jaw was unshaven, and still. He looked more human than she remembered him ever being. By the time the morning settled, Luna had made coffee. Weak coffee, as she liked it. Venom didn't complain when she handed him a mug. She just sipped slowly, his fingers brushing hers in the exchange. The touch lingered longer than necessary. Neither mentioned it. They didn't speak much that morning, only the essential logistics of feeding, diapers, and nap rotations. But between those words, something quieter unfolded. A dance of glances, a memory shared in a half-smile. This knowledge is something that only two people with history could share. Later, when the babies napped, Luna sat on the floor in front of the bassinet cluster, sorting through a box of hand-me-downs someone from her old job had sent months ago. Onesies, burp cloths, tiny hats with little ears. She held one up, inspected a stain, and tossed it into the maybe pile. Venom sat beside her, cross-legged, watching. "These are all for newborns," she muttered. "They'll outgrow them in a week. I'll have my assistant send new ones." Luna shot him a look. "I don't need charity, Venom." "It's not charity," he said calmly. "It's parenting. They're my children too." She sighed. "I'm used to doing this on my own." "I know," he said. "But you don't have to anymore." She didn't respond. Not because she disagreed, but because the possibility of letting herself agree terrified her. "Do you ever think," she began slowly, "that we were too different ever to work?" Venom didn't answer right away. He reached for a tiny hat and ran his thumb across the worn stitching. "I used to think that," he admitted, "that love had to be convenient, compatible, strategic." He met her eyes. "But now, love is supposed to challenge you, stretch you, make you build a different version of yourself to meet someone halfway." Luna studied him, her expression unreadable. "You still speak in business metaphors?" she said dryly. He grinned. "Old habits." She turned her gaze back to the onesies. "We failed once." "We did. And failure has consequences." He nodded. "But failure isn't always the end." Luna's jaw tightened. "You say that like this is a second chance." "It's not," he said. "It's a first chance. At something new. Something we haven't been before." She let that settle. He didn't press. When the babies began to stir, Luna rose and moved instinctively. Venom followed her lead, lifting Micah and Leora from their bassinets and holding them more easily now. Luna watched him settle onto the couch with both babies in his lap, rocking gently, humming a barely there tune, the same tune he used to hum in her kitchen. Her chest tightened. She looked away. That night, they ate leftovers on the couch. Luna reheated the last lentil stew she'd frozen 3 weeks before. Venom didn't complain. He barely even used a spoon. She watched him eat like someone who hadn't tasted something made with care in years. When the apartment went quiet again, and the babies finally gave in to sleep, Luna walked into the kitchen and stood at the sink, rinsing bottles under lukewarm water. Venom appeared behind her, not too close. "Can I help?" "I've got it." "You always say that." "Because I always do." Silence. Then, "You shouldn't have to." She turned to face him. "I don't know how to let you help," she said honestly. "I don't know how to unlearn doing it all alone." "Then let me learn with you," he said. The moment stretched. Something fragile, something old, something unfinished pulsed between them. "Why did you leave?" she asked suddenly. Not the work excuse, the truth. Venom took a breath. "I was afraid," he said, "that if I stayed, I'd fail you in real time. I thought if I left, I could fail quietly from a distance. And now?" He stepped closer. "Now I'd rather fail next to you than succeed without you." Luna's throat tightened. She turned away, placing the bottle down with more force than necessary. And yet, she didn't tell him to leave. Not that night. Not when she passed him a pillow and a blanket. Not when he whispered goodnight. Not when she turned off the lights and closed her bedroom door. Her back against the wood, her breath shallow. Because maybe, just maybe, something in her was starting to believe that healing didn't always look like armor. Sometimes, it looked like surrender. And maybe tomorrow, she'd let herself try. It had been 5 days since Luna brought the babies home. 5 days since Venom entered her life, not as an echo from the past, but as something much more challenging to define, consistent, quiet, almost quiet, necessary. He hadn't missed a shift. Not one 3 a.m. feeding. Not one diaper change. Not one moment when one baby cried while 2 others needed rocking, and Luna's hands were already full. He never asked for praise, never demanded space. He existed beside her, the way rain knows how to fall without fanfare, and still nourish everything. That morning, the sun spilled into the living room with a gentle kind of insistence. Luna had cracked the window open, letting in the early spring air, cool and sweet, carrying the scent of rain that hadn't yet come. The apartment was warm with the hum of life, and yet, Luna felt suspended. Venom was on the floor beside the playmats, gently guiding Micah's hand toward a soft plush rattle. Leora gurgled near him, her tiny legs kicking the air with half-formed determination. The sight was beautiful in its ordinariness. Luna held a mug of tea but didn't sip. She studied the space they now occupied. Not just the apartment, but the emotional radius between them. It had changed. She could feel it like the furniture had shifted while she wasn't looking. She didn't know what scared her more, that she wanted to trust it or already was. Venom looked up, catching her watching. He didn't smile. He just held her gaze. And somehow, that was louder. Later that afternoon, after the babies had fallen into their late nap, Luna stood at the kitchen counter, slicing strawberries. It was one of the few things she craved lately. Fresh, sweet, uncomplicated. Venom walked in quietly and leaned on the frame of the kitchen door. "Do you still make that lemon pound cake?" he asked. She glanced at him. "When I have the energy." "You used to make it when you were mad." She quirked a brow. "You saying I'm mad now?" "I'm saying, you haven't baked since I got here." She rolled her eyes. "Too busy." He stepped closer, his voice gentler. "What are you too busy for, Luna?" The knife paused mid-slice. She looked up. "I don't know what you want me to say." "The truth." Luna exhaled. "The truth is, I don't know how to believe this is real." He said nothing. So she continued, quieter now. "You're here, and you're trying. I see that. But I've also seen you leave. I've felt what it's like to need you and find No one. Venom moved slowly to the opposite side of the counter. I don't want you to forget that pain, he said. I want to be the one who helps replace it. She stared at him, the words tugging something sharp and unguarded inside her. I'm not looking for a savior, she murmured. I'm not trying to be one, he replied. I want to stay, not above you, not ahead of you, with you. The silence followed was thick, not uncomfortable but full, like the air before thunder. Luna finally set down the knife and walked to the window. I don't dream anymore, she said, as if confessing something fragile. Venom turned toward her. Why not? Because my dreams used to include you. They felt betrayed when you were gone. The ache in her voice was soft, but real. He stepped closer, but didn't touch her. Then let's make something new, something you don't have to protect yourself from. She looked at him then, thoroughly. I'm still angry, she whispered. Then be angry, he said. Be angry with me, near me, through me. I'll still be here. Her breath caught. It was so easy to break under words like that. But Luna had built walls over time, and they didn't crumble just because a voice softened. And yet, one part of her, the part that still remembered dancing barefoot in his apartment, the smell of butter and lemon in the oven, leaned forward, almost imperceptibly. You're different, she said. I had to be, he replied. They changed me. You changed me. She didn't smile, but she didn't retreat either. After the babies were fed and swaddled that night, Luna was on the balcony, blanket over her shoulders, watching the street below as people drifted home under warm lights. Venom joined her after a while, holding 2 mugs of warm milk. No words. They stood together, shoulder to shoulder, not quite touching, but the air between them had shifted again. Luna looked at him, her voice quiet. If I give you a key, it's not a promise. It's a possibility. Venom didn't hesitate. I don't need a promise, he said. Just the chance to prove I won't lose it. She held out her hand, pressed a minor silver key into his palm. His fingers curled around it. And she didn't feel afraid for the first time in a long time. The key sat on his nightstand. Venom hadn't brought much with him. Just a small overnight bag, a crumpled white shirt, the same cologne Luna used to tease him for overusing. Yet somehow, the key was the most significant thing in the room. He hadn't used it yet, not because he feared walking in, but because he knew what it meant, that she had given it to him in the first place. It was Saturday when it happened, quiet, gray, and calm, the kind of day that wrapped around the world's edges like a soft blanket. Rain tapped gently at the windows. The apartment smelled like warm cereal, eucalyptus balm, and the unmistakable powdery scent of babies. Luna moved through the space in her usual rhythm, measured, practiced, efficient. But there was a softness to her now, as if her steps weren't quite as guarded. Venom noticed it when she handed him Gabriel, her fingers brushing his wrist for a second longer than usual. Later, when he reached above her to grab a blanket from the top shelf, she didn't flinch at his closeness. And that night, she let him cook. It was almost laughable. Venom Smith, former Fortune cover boy, sleeves rolled up in a narrow kitchen with mismatched pans and one working burner, trying to remember if basil went with lentils. He did burn the onions. Luna snorted behind him. You're heavy-handed, she said, tasting the sauce. I'm persistent, he replied. No, she corrected. You're stubborn. That's different. But she didn't stop eating. They shared the meal at the counter. He standing, she sitting on the stool with her knees pulled up. The babies were tranquil, as if the weather had lulled them into rare harmony. Outside, the street was painted in wet gold from the streetlights. Inside, there was warmth. Not heat, not fire, but warmth. Steady. Sustainable. Venom dried the last dish and leaned against the sink. I don't want to go back. Luna looked up. To where? The old version of us, he said. We were two people trying to outpace our fears. She tilted her head, curious. And now we're just here. Is that enough? He didn't answer right away. It is for me. She set her mug down, fingers curling around the ceramic edge. I'm still figuring it out. You don't owe me a timeline, he said. The simplicity of that shook something in her. It had always been scheduled. Deadlines. Terms. Now it was space. And space, she was learning, required a different kind of courage. After dinner, they bathed the babies together for the first time. Luna had always done it alone, quickly, efficiently, carefully, not to let the water cool. But now, with Venom's arms steady beside hers, she didn't have to rush. Micah giggled when Venom made bubbles from shampoo. Noelle splashed Luna in the face and laughed so hard she hiccuped. Leora refused to let go of the rubber ducky, even when the towel wrapped her tiny body like a burrito. By the time they were all swaddled and asleep, Luna's cheeks hurt from smiling. She curled onto the couch, barefoot, wrapped in a threadbare blanket. Venom sat on the floor beneath her, his back resting against the sofa's edge, the top of his shoulder grazing her knee. The television played something forgettable. Neither of them watched it. Do you remember that rooftop in D.C.? She asked suddenly. He turned toward her. Where did you dare me to sing? And you did. It was your birthday, he said. I would have jumped off that roof if you'd asked. She chuckled softly. You were terrible, but loud. You terrified 3 pigeons and a senator's wife. Venom laughed, then leaned his head back, resting it gently against her knee. The silence stretched, but not uncomfortably. She let her fingers through his hair, absently at first, then with purpose. Slow, soft strokes that carried memory in their weight. He closed his eyes. She didn't speak. There was no plan, no map, no clear destination. Only this moment. Only the way his body stilled beneath her touch. The way her breath aligned with his. The way their silences were finally beginning to understand each other. And that was the beginning of something real. Something they weren't rushing to name, but something neither of them wanted to leave behind. It began with a question, simple, unassuming, but loaded. Do you think you could love me again? Venom had asked it quietly, his voice low, more unsure than Luna had ever heard. The babies had just gone down. The living room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the kitchen light. Outside, wind moved through the alley like a whisper nobody wanted to hear. Luna didn't answer right away. She stood near the window, arms crossed, her body rigid with a tension she hadn't let herself acknowledge in days. He was asking for something she wasn't sure she still knew how to give, not because she didn't feel the stirrings of it, but because she did. And that, somehow, terrified her more. I don't know, she said finally. Part of me already does, but I don't trust that part yet. Venom nodded slowly, as if her honesty didn't wound him, but grounded him. I can wait, he said. She turned then, sharply. That's just it. You say that now. But what happens when this isn't new anymore? When do the babies not need hourly feedings? When my body's no longer a battlefield, and this apartment stops feeling like a sanctuary and starts feeling like a cage? He looked at her thoroughly, directly. I stay. She shook her head. You say it like it's easy. It's not. But loving you never was, and I still did it. A long silence stretched between them, heavy with unsaid things. Luna walked toward the couch and sank into it, her voice quieter now. You weren't there when I found out I was pregnant. I know. You weren't there when the doctor said 5 heartbeats. He swallowed. She said I came home that night and sat on the bathroom floor for 3 hours. I thought, I can't do this. I thought I would lose my mind. Her voice didn't tremble. That made it worse. Venom sat across from her, elbows resting on his knees. I should have been there. You chose not to be, she replied. Don't rewrite it. He nodded. I won't. I was a coward. I didn't want to face what I thought I'd destroyed. So I hid behind meetings in silence. And now? Now I want to face all of it. She stared at him, reading him, and for the first time since his return, she saw something that hadn't been there before. Not remorse, desperation, or guilt. Stillness. And inside that stillness, a man who wasn't trying to be her past, just someone willing to be present in whatever future she chooses. I see the way you look at them, she said, softer, like they're the best thing that's ever happened to you. They are, but you didn't earn them. No, he said, but I'll spend the rest of my life trying to. She studied him for a long time, then whispered, Do you think you could survive if I never let you back in completely? His reply came without hesitation. I'd rather live next to your heart than far away from it. She looked away, but not before he saw her throat tighten. Venom stood and strolled to where she sat. He didn't touch her. He lowered himself to the floor before her, so their eyes were level. Luna, he said quietly, I know I hurt you, and nothing I do will ever erase that. But I'm not here asking for absolution. I'm just asking for a place in your real life. Not the version you show to prove you're strong, but the tired one. Soft. Messy. She blinked. He continued. If that means sitting on this floor every night while you rebuild your trust one breath at a time, I'll sit here. Until the end of us. Or the beginning. She let out a shaky breath. You're relentless, she murmured. He smiled faintly, only about the things that matter. She leaned back into the couch cushion, arms slowly loosening from their guarded knot. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The babies rustled in their sleep, a faint murmur of dream sounds trailing from the nursery. I don't know how to stop protecting myself, Luna admitted. Then let me help, Venom said. Not by knocking down your walls, but by building beside them. Her eyes welled suddenly, unexpected, unwanted, but real. She didn't brush the tears away. He didn't point them out. Instead, he took her hand, gently, like a whisper asking permission. She didn't pull away. They sat like that for a long time. Two people who had once shattered something sacred, now slowly piecing it back together. Not because they forgot the pain, but because they finally understood its shape. And maybe there was still room for love to bloom in the cracks. It didn't happen with fireworks, not with declarations shouted beneath rain-soaked skies, or grand confessions under glittering chandeliers. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of ordinary day that never makes it into memory, unless someone gives it meaning. The sun filtered through the half-open blinds, casting soft slats of gold across the nursery walls. The apartment smelled faintly of oatmeal and lavender. Noel was the first to stir, then Gabriel, and within minutes, the household was alive again. Soft cries, sleepy yawns, bottles warming. Venom was already awake, cradling Leora in his arms, humming that off-key tune Luna used to tease him about. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching. Something had shifted. Not outside. Cambridge was still gray. The hallway stairs were creaky, and the space was too small for 6 lives. But inside her, The shift was unmistakable. The ache had softened. The defenses, though not gone, had relaxed their grip. And the heaviness, the one she'd carried alone for so long, no longer sat entirely on her shoulders. Venom looked up, eyes catching hers across the morning light. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. That afternoon, she asked him to accompany her to a small community clinic a few blocks away. Nothing dramatic, just routine immunizations for the babies, a crowded waiting room, the scent of disinfectant, the familiar exhaustion of holding a child while filling out paperwork. But when the receptionist asked for father's name, Luna didn't pause. She wrote it. Venom Smith. Afterward, they walked home silently, the stroller wheels rattling lightly over the uneven sidewalk. Halfway up the block, Luna stopped and looked at him. "You remember the promise you made?" she asked. Venom turned toward her. "Which one?" "The one about staying, even if it meant building beside the walls." He nodded, solemn. "I think," she said, her voice soft and slow, "I'm ready to start unlocking a few doors." He didn't speak. He just reached for her hand. And this time, she let him take it without hesitation. That night, they tucked the babies in together, not like two people doing a chore, but like a rhythm they had learned. Quiet words, soft kisses to small brows, synchronized glances that didn't need translating. Later, on the couch, Luna pulled the old photo album from the shelf. Their college days. He had messy hair and a nervous grin. She is in oversized hoodies and notebooks filled with dreams. They laughed over the past, but not bitterly. They let it live there, in pages and dust, where it belonged. Venom looked at her and asked, "Do you think we can ever be the people in those photos again?" Luna traced the edge of a picture with her finger. "No," she whispered. "We're something better now." He leaned in, brushing a kiss to her temple. Not a claim, not a plea, just presence. And that was more than enough. The babies didn't cry that night. Or maybe they did, and it didn't feel like chaos anymore. Just life, just family, just a love that had finally learned to breathe, not in perfection, but in persistence. As the lights dimmed and the city settled into its late-night hush, Luna glanced at the man she once thought she had lost forever. He was still here, and so was she, not as broken people hoping to rewind time, but as two souls who had walked through fire and chosen to keep reaching for each other in the quiet after. Because sometimes the greatest love stories are not about who stayed from the beginning, but about who showed up after the storm and stayed anyway. If this story moved you, we'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments. Give the video a like if Luna and Venom's journey touched your heart. And don't forget to follow our channel for more beautiful stories about love, second chances, and the power of staying. Thank you for walking this road with us. See you in the next story.